What's up? It's Andrew from the band Ripped to Shreds, and on today's Everything Grindcore, we're gonna look at what makes this Discordance Axis song off their album The Inalienable Dreamless so sick. Pattern Blue is made up of three main riffs. The first one is a groove riff. Then a blast riff. And finally, it ends with a series of slow chugs. So John Chang, the singer of Discordance Axis, has always maintained in interviews that when they were active in the early 90s to the very early 2000s, basically no one in the American scene gave a shit about them. And of course, when you look at the drum part for this first groove riff, I think it's really obvious why no one understood, because it's absolutely nothing like American mainstays like Ass Suck or Capitalist Casualties or any other grindcore power violence band of the time. Not to mention the chords that are still totally alien to grindcore vocabulary. So first off, we have this chord, which is super ambiguous. We are tuned to drop D. So we're in the land of one finger power chords. This chord has notes F sharp, D, G sharp, C sharp, D sharp again, finally G sharp on the very top. So if we take this F sharp as the root here, we've got flat 13, a sus2, the fifth, the major 6, and then repeating the sus2 on the very top. There's three adjacent notes here, right? The flat 13, the fifth, and the major 6. Those notes are all adjacent to each other, but because of this spread voicing, they don't sound quite as dissonant as, say, like a panic chord. So some obvious touchstones here for this kind of harmonic texture in metal. Obviously there's Voivod with Killing Technology and everything that comes after that. And of course King Crimson, which is not like strictly metal, but would have been a reference for Voivod and for Discordance Axis. On Inalienable Dreamless, they used the Ampeg SS150 for the guitar sound, which is basically the same thing as the more famous brother VH140C. For this demo, I'm actually using the This Heavy Earth Flesh Raw, which is the guts of a VH140C in a pedal format. It's grindcore, there's a shit ton of gain. So the notes of this aren't as clear and articulate as, a King Crimson record might be. To me, it doesn't sound super clear or defined, and it's more like a cloud of dissonance and tension. I feel like I'm mostly hearing these upper extensions on the top. So maybe we're actually hearing this as like A flat, D flat, E flat. And it's more like a reverse power chord plus a fifth. I think there's a good amount of, and this adds a bit of prettiness on the top. Anyways, this riff is built around sliding down a whole step. And then there's this little C to E flat stab where each section repeats. And the drum groove is kind of like this. Right hand is riding on the crash in eighth notes, while the kick is on the upbeat, and the snare is not on the 2 and 4, but on the 2 and. and 4. It creates this kind of falling forward feeling. You might hear some similar drum beats in other Dave Whitty projects like Human Remains, for example. And you would see his influence on drummers like Brian Fajardo in Noisier and Cognizant, and also Gobinda in Chapang. And actually, Chapang named their own vanity label Gurkha Commando Blast Team after John Chang's Grindcore Ninja Commando team. One reason the kick is like so clear on this record is there's actually no bass guitar at all. So Discordance Axis was a 3-piece. They always played live as a 3-piece. Rob Martin would never overdub a bass guitar on their records. The engineer for this record had him use a subharmonic bass synthesizer pedal. It would generate those sub-frequencies out of his guitar and give the low end a little more oomph. But because the record lacks a real bass guitar, there's nothing for the kick drum to really fight against, and that's why it comes through so clear. I have actually done something kind of similar before. If people send me sessions that don't have a bass guitar, then I just copy paste the guitars and I pitch shift them down an octave and then filter off some of the top end so it doesn't sound as weird. It works in a pinch. Let's take a look at the blast beat section. Fucking A, bud. I think of this section as being in 6/8. That means if you count out the accents, it goes like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. On the drums, Whitty is accenting the 1 and the 4. On the crash, ba-ta-ta, ba-ta-ta, ba-ta-ta. And the 2 and 3 are on the ride cymbal. I feel like the blast beat on this particular song, the snare starts to disappear a little bit, but you can hear the snare super clear on all the other songs on this record. This record was actually recorded totally live, without a click, without any like triggers. And when I listen, what I'm mostly hearing is like overhead and room mic maybe, and of course a close kick mic. But I'm not really hearing much like close tom or snare mic. If you're depending mostly on the overheads, it's easy, I think, for the snare to get a bit lost on a very blast heavy record. You have to hit the snare that much harder for it to speak. The actual riff goes from this E flat power chord to an A power chord with a fifth in the bass. I usually hear these fourth interval dyads as an inverted power chord, since that's just fairly common guitar vocabulary, and this E flat to A is a tritone apart, flat 5. The rhythm of the chords follows the crash of the blast beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the recording, I hear the guitar playing some muted downstrokes. But actually, on some of the live footage, it doesn't look like Martin plays the muted at all. He's just going... On the tab that Martin wrote, he thinks of the blast section as starting with the... And that's where it repeats for him. He also explicitly notates upstrokes and the downstrokes. This is upstroked, meaning we hear this A, then the E, which helps it feel a bit more like an A power chord rather than E and a fourth interval. The difference is a bit subtle, but you can hear, to me, that's a pretty big difference. So according to the Compiling Autumn series of interviews, Dreamless was the first DA record where John Chang wasn't taking their rehearsal tapes and cutting and splicing them to actually create the song arrangements, dictating, okay, this part repeats this many times, we're going to take this part out, we're going to take this other part from maybe some other song and put it in there, and use that to create the songs. Because up until Inalienable Dreamless, John was the primary arranger of all the songs. But since DA broke up sometime after the release of Joho, their Japan tour kept getting delayed. Martin actually didn't go on that tour. It was Steve Procopio who filled in. During those 2 or 3 years in between DA breaking up and reforming for Dreamless, Martin was writing riffs and songs on his own. When DA decided to get back together, him and Whitty jammed on those songs and completed them on their own before showing them to John Chang for feedback, which was apparently relatively minimal compared to the first 2 albums. I think there's a certain amount of choppiness, if that's the right word, in the arrangements of Ulterior and Joho, when the sections would flow one to the next. To me, those seem a bit more obviously not worked out in the rehearsal room. And on Dreamless, the band seems so much more comfortable writing on sections until they feel it's the right time to move on. Especially on the end part of Pattern Blue, you can see that kind of repetitiveness sink in. And then, of course, Let Us Drive to Nowhere and all the Jigsaw and all those other songs that repeat parts like 20 or 30 times. So the ending of the song is built around these two chords being chugged slowly while the drums are blasting as fast as they can. That slow guitar, fast drum interplay between Martin and Whitty is really the heart of the DA formula on Dreamless. The first chord here is the same as the blast riff, just down a half step. The second chord is the same as the one from the intro riff, just on F, without all these upper extension notes. The end of the song, leaving out notes, it kind of recontextualizes that earlier riff into really leaning into that dissonance on the lower strings. On previous albums, Joho and Ulterior, lyrics were more based around like sci-fi and poetry. Prior to writing the lyrics for Dreamless, when John was in Japan, he saw the Evangelion movie Death and Rebirth. And that inspired him to use images and events from Eva as a metaphor for his own relationship problems. He's still making use of poetry, especially in this song, where he quotes T.S. Eliot's poem The Wasteland, section 4, Death by Water, in Pattern Blue. According to John, he conceived of Dreamless in 3 suites. Angel Present to Pattern Blue would be the second suite. So Pattern Blue is the ending of the suite. In the anime, Pattern Blue indicates that angels have been detected. Giant beings of indeterminate origin that are attempting to initiate an Armageddon that would merge all of humanity's souls into a single consciousness. And then there's this other concept central to Eva world building called the AT field. That is a psychological barrier that divides each individual person's souls and egos into individual consciousnesses. You know, there's a lot of technobabble in Eva, and there's a lot of Kabbalic or Christian imagery that's kind of sprinkled in for the sake of being mysterious, cool Western stuff. But the heart of Eva is about relationships. And that's what John connected with when he saw Death and Rebirth in Japanese, which was a language that at the time he barely understood. In briefly analyzing the lyrics, we should also note that John explicitly says that he doesn't want to explain them, and he prefers for the reader to make their own interpretations of the words. I think he took a bit of a departure from that approach on Gridlink. To me, those lyrics are a lot more literal. We'll start with the end of the song, because that's the quotation from T.S. Eliot, which is from the end of a slightly longer verse that goes, "Gentile or Jew, you who turn the wheel, look to windward. Consider Phlebas, who was once as handsome and tall as you." And that entreats the reader to consider their own mortality, because no matter who you are, you will one day also be dead in the abyss of the sea. Viewing the lyrics through that lens of mortality, it goes, "All scrambled inside, Pattern Blue. No, not an angel without wings. God be without you. Mat this smashed facade with AT field. Its wings penetrated and destroyed me. Pattern Blue." Angels in Eva, they're harbingers of change, and they turn humanity into a goo soup where there's no individual egos, there's no more conflict, there's no more misunderstandings, there's no more pain. And the narrator of this song states that he's all scrambled inside, but he wants to block out the outside world. And using that logic, I might say the narrator fears being alone because they're all fucked up inside, sheltered from the world in their AT field. But they also remind themselves with that T.S. Eliot excerpt that in the end, death awaits all of us, and we should consider what we're doing with our lives. What sells that interpretation to me is the combination of the song title, Pattern Blue, and the back of the DVD cover. Dreamless came out in a DVD box format. On the back of it, it says, "I will live forever, alone. That interpretation to me kind of like ties together the themes about John's relationship problems, the hedgehog's dilemma, which is central to themes of Evangelion. I think if I showed my high school lit teacher that, they would give me like a C- and say, that sounds like some bullshit you came up with 5 minutes before class. John's vocals on this record, and actually really most of the Discordance Axis records, are more abstract in rhythm and they don't follow the beat in lockstep, whereas in like Gridlink, his vocals are a bit more intelligible. I think some of the long held out screams mirror the way that Martin's slow guitar over the fast blast beats contrast. So on the 2019 album, No One Knows What the Dead Think, which was actually supposed to be the 4th Discordance Axis album, but Dave Whitty's schedule didn't line up with John's timeline. John's vocal approach is more similar to Gridlink, where it directly falls on the beat. I think they're also a little more buried, like the other Discordance Axis albums. But I think that goes to show that, you know, he was still changing as an artist as the years went on. Okay, so that's pretty much all I can squeeze out of a 60-second grindcore song. So that's all I have for today. Don't forget to come to our tour in Japan and Taiwan. We are starting in 2 weeks. We are on tour with aohen and also myself as Hokage Grindtime. Please come out, check the description for the dates, and as always, eat ass, blast fast, and peace.